mixed conditions, defining moments, and a couple of DNFs thrown in there as well. This week I'm chatting all about the Las Vegas Grand Prix, so get ready because you've been summoned to the steward's office. Hello everyone and welcome back to the steward's office. I'm Syra and this week F1 started its last triple header of the season because they headed out to Las Vegas, which is also our last US GP of the season. We are now down to 2 races left after Vegas finished, which is insane. And before I get into everything that happened, just to let you guys know, there is not going to be a Qatar GP review episode. I'm going away on holiday, which means I'm not going to have the chance to record. I'm hoping that I'll still get to watch it though, because there is a sports bar at the hotel which apparently does show the F1, so fingers crossed I can still catch up and I'll still be posting. I'll have stuff scheduled and we'll be posting reactions to the Qatar GP on my Instagram and TikTok at stewards_office, so make sure you follow me over there. But there won't be a GP review episode next weekend, just so you know. But let's head into what's actually going on this weekend, what just happened at Vegas. Can't lie to you guys, Vegas is not a track I necessarily enjoy. I know that a lot of people feel the same. The drivers don't tend to actually enjoy racing there. The track isn't super interesting. It's a lot of long straights, which can be great for overtaking, but I feel like we don't get a lot of exciting action on this track. But it is on the calendar for a long, long time to come, so we are dealing with it. A little bit of news though that came out after this GP that I just want to talk about, because I don't really know where else in the episode to put this, but there have been rumours, as of recording, that Aston Martin are going to be sacking Andy Cowell in his role as team principal. Now, he ended up taking over the role from Mike Crack, I want to say it was the beginning of this year. Mike moved more into like an operational role within the team. I think he enjoys doing more stuff behind the scenes and talking to the press. Andy Cowell came in his place, but after this weekend's GP, there were a lot of news reports that he was going to be sacked. And I've also seen reports that it's not necessarily him being sacked, but that he wanted to move out of that role as team principal because apparently there have been issues with him and Adrian Newey not agreeing on things, and he would rather take a back seat on things, have someone else come in as team principal, and apparently he's going to make the move towards the Honda engine unit and working on that instead for Aston Martin. It's rumours as of right now. It might change by the time you guys listen to this. There are a couple of names being batted around about who could be taking over from Andy Cowell. I don't think it's going to surprise anyone that Christian Horner's name has been thrown into the mix, but also people like Andreas Seidel, and I have seen Mattia Binotto's name being batted around. I don't know how true any of that is. I don't necessarily know what's going to happen there. In terms of Horner joining Aston Martin, I feel like I'd be kind of surprised if it happened, just because Adrian Newey obviously moved to Aston Martin away from Red Bull. I feel like I remember there being rumours and whispers of issues between him and Horner, and I can't imagine Newey being too impressed that Christian Horner's come over from Red Bull into Aston Martin, and I can't really imagine Aston making that decision right now, but I don't know. We'll wait and see if it's even true, because it's all a rumour right now. But once again, for Aston Martin, things just seem to be a little unstable in that team in terms of personnel. Let's head into what actually happened during the race weekend, and I can't lie to you guys, I only woke up for the race. It was on at 4 a.m, qualifying was on at 4 a.m, and I was like, no, I'll catch up on that. Friday, I was like, there's no way I have work in the day, and I will not get through my work day if I'm not getting a decent amount of sleep. So my hat's off to people, especially like Australia way, that do wake up insanely early to watch these races every weekend because they have to deal with that time zone difference. But yeah, Vegas was just a no-go in terms of waking up for practice and qualifying. But when I caught up on qualifying, yeah, that was a lot going on there because we had rain throughout qualifying. It was wet weather, and for the first time in a very, very long time, we finally saw the return of the blue full wet tyres. I don't know how long it's been since we've seen them on the cars. They've been rendered basically useless for most of the season, but they got their chance to shine in Vegas. And I don't think that's a place anyone thought they were going to be used. But that wet qualifying did make things difficult for pretty much everyone at different points. We saw Lewis Hamilton exiting in Q1, and honestly, at that point when I saw that, I was glad I didn't wake up early for the qualifying sessions, because yeah, I would have just been heartbroken. Seemed to be some miscommunication there though between him and his race engineer. He did go over one of the bollards and collected it under his car. He then got told to push at the end. He wasn't safe, and I'll give it to Adami, who told him, you need to push, you're not safe, go on another fast lap. Lewis thought he saw a red flag, or like a red light, and thought that he couldn't go quickly again, and so he slowed down and didn't put in a fast lap time. And obviously, look, Lewis got given the correct information from his race engineer. He hadn't listened to it, so that is on him. I do think that this is a really big indication of that trust issue that he has with his side of the garage, or his race engineer at the very least at the moment. And that's something we've seen ongoing throughout this season, but I think this was a really good example of why you need to be able to trust your race engineer and the information they're giving you, because when you don't, you're gonna second guess that information at really critical points in qualifying or the race or in practice. So yeah, I think it's a big indicator that that trust between driver and race engineer still isn't there yet, and I don't know whether that will grow. We also had Alex Albon crashing right at the end of Q1. He did manage to get back to the pits, but his front wing was not happy. Yuki Tsunoda also out in Q1, and Kimi Antonelli, bless him, qualifying in P17. Some amazing news though for Carlos Sainz, who managed to qualify in P3, drove so well in the wet weather. It just seemed like Williams really managed to figure out what their wet weather setup needed to be for qualifying, and Sainz was able to get the most out of that car. We had Norris on pole position, Max Verstappen in P2, and for Oscar Piastri, his qualifying woes continue. Now, it wasn't the worst by far for him. He was in P5, but I said it last race weekend as well, it's just not enough right now to be able to beat his teammate. P5 was not the absolute worst for Piastri, but it wasn't putting him in the best place for the race. And an interesting race it was, and let's kick off talking about the McLarens, because you thought it was going to be an okay weekend for them, you thought it couldn't be too bad. Yeah, it was bad. Now bear in mind, we had Lando Norris starting on pole position, wonderful, great, lost the lead on lap 1, which is not what him or his side of the garage would have wanted, but Max Verstappen drove really smart throughout that lap 1 and managed to overtake Lando Norris. And for Lando, for the rest of the race, he wasn't massively struggling, but there were some sort of gremlins with his car where he had slowed down a fair bit, and there were rumours that he wasn't fuel managing, or like the fuel hadn't been enough in the car by the time they got to the end of the race. So it wasn't a brilliant race for him. There were small points where you thought he could battle for the win again, but I think by the end of the race you could tell he wasn't able to push anymore, and there was no way that he was going to be able to catch up with Max Verstappen, because even his team was stopping him from pushing. For Oscar, he dropped down to P7 by the end of lap 2, and not great for his championship fight. But I'm talking about their races, and to be fair, none of it even mattered, if I'm honest with you guys, because both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri ended up being disqualified. Now bear in mind, right, I woke up for the race, watched the race, went back to bed, fell asleep. When I woke up and checked my phone, all I saw across my timeline were people being like, McLaren have been referred to the stewards, are they going to get disqualified, what's going on, why haven't we had a decision yet? That was an interesting wake-up call. They had an issue with their plank wear. It was more than what it should have been, and that's a really cut and dry disqualification. I think it was in China that Ferrari had this issue and got the double disqualification there for it, and we've seen it with other teams throughout this season and previous seasons. So I think when people knew it was because of plank wear, even before the decision came out, you knew it was going to be a double DSQ. We go back to the Brazil Grand Prix weekend, that Sao Paulo Grand Prix, and after that weekend, there were rumours floating around online that there were issues with some teams when it came to plank wear, and that some of the teams were apparently using something that was illegal and against the regulations to help with their plank wear and to stop it from wearing so much during a race. And apparently a team had taken this concern to the FIA, who investigated it and had found out that there was an issue. All rumours, right? There's been no statement, and there probably won't be even if something had happened. So some people do think that maybe McLaren was one of those teams that was having that extra benefit from something illegal on their car to help them with plank wear. And McLaren did try and defend itself to the FIA and the stewards and basically said, look, there was way more porpoising and bouncing with the car than we had expected, and that's a really big mitigating factor in why the plank wear was where it was, and so you shouldn't really disqualify us for it. Hats off to them for trying, but it was just never going to work. Even having those mitigating circumstances, according to them, it was never going to work out. And to be fair, the FIA did say, look, we don't think you did this intentionally, but it is a cut and dry disqualification. And I think that's fair. I don't think McLaren purposely tried to run their car too low to have the extra plank wear. But yeah, there are no mitigating circumstances that can really save you from that DSQ. And so both McLaren drivers ended up being disqualified. Look, neither driver is going to have wanted to be disqualified. It's not as bad for Oscar as it is for Lando, in my opinion, only because, right, Oscar is in no worse position than he was last race, and he's the one trying to catch up with Lando Norris and trying to get more points to overtake him. For Lando, once again, he's in no worse place, really, when it comes to his teammate at least, but he would have wanted to extend that lead away from Oscar Piastri, because had the race finished where it was, Lando would have extended his lead and Oscar would have more points to make up. Now they're just where they were last race, right? And so, yeah, I don't think it's as hard for Oscar as it will be for Lando, just in terms of that points difference. We have to remember that this is actually a three-way championship fight, because Max Verstappen is still there and he won the Vegas Grand Prix, and this disqualification of both of the McLarens massively helped him out. He is now on equal points with Oscar Piastri for P2 in the championship, which is insane, and there is a good chance that Oscar could end up losing even P2 now. There are only 24 points that separate both Oscar and Max from Lando Norris. We have a sprint in Qatar, the Qatar GP, and then at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. I'm not saying it's going to be straightforward if Max were to try and win this championship. Like, by a long shot, I'm not going to say it's easy or straightforward. However, I will say that that disqualification definitely helped make it a bigger possibility of him potentially winning a fifth championship. So overall, awful weekend for McLaren, but a brilliant weekend to be Max Verstappen and to be a Max Verstappen fan. Looking at some of our other constructors, though, that are in that sort of top end of that championship fight for the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari, look, I'm not going to say it's as bad as what happened to McLaren, because at least both Ferraris finished the race and finished in the points, so, you know, we'll take that from Ferrari. However, it was a pretty bad weekend for them. And this is coming off the back of the comments from John Elkann earlier in the week before the Vegas Grand Prix, where he was saying that the drivers need to talk less, need to focus on driving. And Lewis and Charles both came into this weekend and went to their media and said, look, he meant it with good intention. We know John, we talk to John regularly, and we know he didn't mean it in a bad way. He was trying to sort of rally the troops and, you know, help inspire us to do better. I don't know, guys. I just need someone to explain to me what good intention there was by saying that to the media, but it's fine. The Ferrari drivers were on PR duties, to be honest with you. I think we're all very aware of that, because there was a lot of backlash towards John Elkann after those comments, not just from Ferrari fans in general, from commentators, from ex-drivers who are all sitting there like, this is not the way you motivate a team ever, and you don't need to be in management to know that. But look, I was hoping that we would get into the Las Vegas Grand Prix weekend and that something good would happen for the Ferrari driver, and so that John didn't need to come out and say all these comments again. Lewis Hamilton qualifying in P20 was not a great start, and he did manage to get to P12 by the start of lap 2. Went from P19 because Yuki Tsunoda ended up starting from the pit lane up to P12 by lap 2. I think is decent. He managed to avoid a lot of the incidents that were going on around him in that opening lap. It did get to a point though where he was behind Nico Hülkenberg and he just didn't seem to have the pace to get the overtake in. some of the overtakes he did do, it did take him a while to get them done as well. He just didn't have the outright pace. And then for Charles Leclerc, who I think had a much better weekend than Lewis Hamilton. He definitely did. He qualified in P9. He finished higher up in the points compared to Lewis. I think Lewis, after the disqualifications, was in P8, I want to say. Charles finished higher in the race, but he still was not happy after qualifying and the race. And in qualifying, he was like, yeah, we still have a car that can't cope with wet weather. And after the race, he was just like, yeah, we had no pace. We didn't have great balance in the car. So he is really not happy with this year's car anymore, and that frustration, I think, for Charles has really bubbled over this weekend, more so than we've seen in previous weekends, because I think it's been blatantly obvious that both of the Ferrari drivers are looking forward to getting rid of this car. They've not had the best season. But for Charles, the frustration from him really, really came to a head this weekend from the radio messages that we got. So I'm just looking forward to the end of the season for both of the drivers. I can't lie. And I've got my fingers crossed that 2026 might be better. I'm not saying I'm hoping for brilliant things. I just want it to be better than both of the drivers looking so depressed after the race. What about Mercedes, though, who really had a good weekend after the disqualifications? Both of their drivers ended up on the podium, so massive benefit for them as well. George had some struggles with his steering wheel, but nothing that caused him huge issues, and he didn't need to retire. The star, though, of that team was Kimi Antonelli this weekend, who made an absolutely epic comeback. Now, remember I said he started in P17, and then I said both Mercedes ended up on the podium? Yep. P17 to P3. And what makes it all the more special is the fact that he ended up getting a 5-second time penalty for a teeny tiny jump start that he did. Even with that penalty, still finished on the podium. And that last stint that he did on his tyres, they were over 40 laps old, and they were hard tyres that he had driven for the majority of the race. So with 40 lap old tyres, with a 5-second time penalty starting from P17, Kimi Antonelli still managed to get into P3. It was such an incredible drive from him. Let's have a chat about what went on in the midfield, though. And it was a lot of incidents, I can't lie, especially right at the start of the race. We had Bortoleto hitting Stroll right at the start, and that was a DNF for both the drivers. We had Alex Albon, who got investigated for a jump start but was okay in the end. That got cleared. He then hit the back of a Haas at the start of the race. He had issues with his radio, and at points they had to use the pit board for communication with him. He then had an incident with Lewis Hamilton that caused a 5-second time penalty, and there was enough damage on his car that he ended up retiring, and I think Lewis said he thinks it also caused some damage on his own car. Liam Lawson's front wing was broken at the start after having an incident with Oscar Piastri that got absolutely dragged across the track for a while at the first couple of laps. That was awful to watch. And yeah, that was really it with the midfield. Those are my stand-up points. There was just a lot of chaos going on there. I do want to mention, though, the fact that with Liam Lawson's front wing, and I think it was his front wing, debris came off of it, landed on the track. Marshals had obviously ran onto the track to pick up that debris, and the double yellows were waved, but the FIA didn't end up throwing out the VSC until quite a bit later, and we were seeing these marshals on track. And the FIA just weren't calling a virtual safety car or a safety car at all, which is strange because there is personnel on track, and normally that does warrant the cars slowing down significantly, not just with flags. We've seen it a couple of times this season now, and it is a concern. Marshals work for free. They volunteer to do these races. They don't get paid, or there's a lot of training and sort of accreditation that those marshals need to do in order to be able to marshal at these circuits and for these races. The least they can ask for is safety and then consistency in how their safety is approached. So very questionable decisions there. Now, before we end this podcast episode, and I know it's a bit of a shorter one, but honestly, other than the disqualification and that little bit of chaos in the middle, or the midfield lot, Vegas was not that interesting for me, and this always happens. The start was interesting, the end was kind of interesting, nothing happened in the middle, and then post-race we got the disqualification. So yeah, a shorter episode because there wasn't a whole load that happened there. But let's get into just my winners and losers of the weekend before I finish this episode. And for winners, of course, I've got Kimi Antonelli. He was my driver of the day by far. It was such a brilliant performance from him, and yeah, my hat's off to being able to drive like that on such old tyres. The other winner, it has to be Max Verstappen. Regardless of whether he won the race or not, the fact that he is now on even points with Oscar Piastri is insane. So I think he's going to be coming away from this weekend super happy. And then for my losers, Alex Albon, because the DNF from the race, the crash with Lewis, the crash in qualifying. But then when you look at everything over the past couple of weekends, things haven't gone too well for him, and he has had incidents, retirements, just bad race pace. Yeah, it's been a hard end of the season for him. And obviously both McLarens also have to be on that list because they're walking away with absolutely no points through no fault of their own either. This is on the team, and the team have put their hands up and taken responsibility for it. But that wraps up my Las Vegas Grand Prix review. Like I mentioned, I'm not going to be here for the Qatar GP, so there won't be a podcast episode. I will be back for Abu Dhabi though, that season closer, and I can't lie, that DNF has benefited me in some ways because there was the chance that Lando could win the championship in Qatar. And I was going to be gutted if I couldn't do a podcast episode if he won it. Now, I think it still is technically possible for him to win it. It does make it a little less likely now. So I think this is going down to Abu Dhabi. I'll be surprised if it doesn't. I think it might be more clear about if Lando is going to run away with it in Abu Dhabi or not. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening, and diolch yn fawr. Make sure you follow me on TikTok and Instagram at Stewards_office, and I will see you guys the next time you're summoned to Stewards office.